Welcome back to Uncolored. I'm Kevin Metcalf. We're just sitting around having fun, talking big ideas. Not going to save the world. It's already been done. But I like talking about these issues. And when you talk about big ideas, there seems to be a couple of ways you can go about it. There are ways to talk about ideas where people are trying to discover the truth. And then there's another way of discussing ideas where I get the impression that people, what they're really trying to do is protect a worldview. And they're trying to protect it against challenges that, if true, would show that their worldview has problems and not only might need to be changed a little bit, but might need to be tossed away altogether. And I think that's probably, if not the biggest fear, well, maybe that's not the biggest fear, but that's a big fear for a lot of people. We grew up with these ideas, we think they're true, and we like them for whatever reason. And when we encounter something that says that idea probably isn't correct, there's a lot of problems that happen. And I think the people who are trying to protect their worldview have a very particular way of going about protecting that idea. So before we get into what we're going to do today, we're going to talk about this book called, where's the book? How Reason Can Lead to God. And it's a book written by Dr. Joshua Rasmussen. He's a professor down, I believe, in Azusa Pacific down in Southern California. And there he is there in his rugged picture. Look at him, looking off into the distance as a philosopher does, contemplating matters of great weight and significance in the distance. Joshua Rasmussen, in my mind, is at the pinnacle of those people who construct ideas, or at least model ideas, and are able to express, talk about, and defend these ideas, and not necessarily defend these ideas, because that's not what Josh does, and that's what makes him, in particular, a very significant person, I think, when it comes to ideas. Dr. Rasmussen has this way of going about philosophy, and he's a great philosopher. And he does it different than many other philosophers that I know, where if he's in some sort of a discussion or debate, Dr. Rasmussen isn't trying to protect his idea. Joshua Rasmussen, in my opinion, Dr. Rasmussen, in my opinion, is one of the most fearless idea folks out there. Idea folks, philosopher. That'd be a better way to say it. Because Dr. Rasmussen, what he'll do is, he'll take someone's challenge to his idea and actually try to make it stronger. He invites people to test and challenge his ideas, which it's not rare. But the people who are doing that, who are saying, listen, this is my idea, bring at it what you got, and I'll look at it. I'll try to make it the best argument. I think they call it steel manning an argument rather than straw manning an argument. And then I'm going to see if I can make something out of it. Maybe it does. I do have to adjust my ideas. And you'll see this process go on. I don't remember what paper it was, but Dr. Rasmussen was either on a blog going back and forth with Dr. Alex Proust, who's another brilliant guy. And you can see them talking about the challenges to particular ideas, even challenging each other on these ideas. And the attempt is they want the idea that they have to be the best it possibly can, one, or if it's a bad idea, let's just get rid of it. So in my mind, as I started to learn these things, if you want to know how to understand objective reality properly, which is really what this is all about, we're just trying to figure out what's going on in the world, what's true, and you can sift through all the BS that you hear from so many other outlets. And I think philosophers, like Dr. Rasmussen, do it the best. So that's why I wanted to look at his book, How Reason Can Lead to God, and talk a little bit about Dr. Rasmussen, because if you want to do an idea right, this is how you do it. As I've been looking at this for the past several years, there are three characteristics that have come out to me, and I'm not saying that these are the only ones, but these are the ones that I see regularly from people like Dr. Rasmussen, who's looking for the truth, and other people who sometimes are not necessarily looking for the truth, but again, trying to protect their worldview from the truth. is there's these three characteristics that I see. Here's the first one. The first one is that people who don't have, or who are looking for the truth, they don't have a hidden agenda. When they're coming to you with an idea or some discussion about ideas, they're very open about what they're talking about. And they're not trying to sneak something in the back door. You're going to know straight ahead what they're trying to get at, what the idea is about, and all of their arguments are going to be to that end. Okay. At the other end, people who I don't think are trying to get to the truth are doing their best to, they will have some sort of a different agenda. In other words, what they'll be saying will actually be protecting something else that they don't want to get out there. The way I see it is people like this generally, when they're telling you something, it's always the stuff that they're not telling you is the stuff that you really want to know. The things they're telling you, that's all BS. And you know it if you listen to any press conference, whether it's sports, politics, whatever. Those press conferences, those are people with hidden agendas. They're telling you this, but there's something else going on that they just don't want you to really know about. And those are people, again, they don't want anything to do with the truth. They're trying to protect this world that they've constructed. The second thing I see is this. People who want to find the truth deal with objections to their idea much differently than people who are trying to protect their worldview. People who are trying to find the truth, typically what they do is they invite all challenges. That's the first thing. But then they take those challenges and they try to make those challenges as strong as they can. Like I referred to before, they try to what they call steel man a person's argument. So even if somebody says, you're asserting A and they're asserting not A, and whatever argument there is for not A, the person who's looking for the truth will try to see the very best that not A has to offer. Okay. Somebody who is not looking for the truth, what they'll end up doing is what they call making a straw man. They will change the argument and say something that the person's idea doesn't say. So instead of saying, if somebody says, I'm asserting A as true, then the person who's challenging the argument won't deal with A. They'll deal with something A prime, something different than A, and try to make it look like A. Because A, oftentimes, for the person challenging it, is an argument that they don't have a challenge for. But because they don't like A, they're going to try and make A seem like something that they can attack. And often that's a bit of deception that goes on. And I hate to say it because a lot of good people that I like do it. But it's just bold-faced deception. They're not being honest about it. And I think that comes from a fear of the fact that if I can't challenge that idea, then I have to accept that idea, or at least deal with it in some way. And people don't want to deal with ideas that challenge their own worldview. And making a straw man is one way to protect yourself from having to deal with an idea that might mean that, I got to change some things about how I'm thinking about the world. Or at least this isn't the way I thought about the world, isn't quite the way it is. And I've got some work to do. Most people don't want to do that work. I don't know if you can hear my dog drinking water in the back. The second and the third thing is this. People who are looking for the truth, in my opinion, I don't find them to be dogmatic. And what I mean is, when they say that this is how it seems to me, what you won't hear them say is, if you don't agree with me, you're wrong, simply because you don't agree with me. You're a bad person, right? We're going to punish you. We're going to cancel you. We're going to not put you in, you're out of the club if you don't agree with how I understand the world. People who are looking for the truth are, in my opinion, I don't know the person you can point to, like a Dr. Rasmussen, a William Lane Craig, Eric Hernandez, Tim Stratton, Mike Winger is another guy. Mike Winger is less of a philosopher, more of a theologian, but he's one of the guys that I go to. And listen, I'm very careful about who I listen to when they're talking about the Bible, because there's so many people who tell you they know what they're talking about, and a lot of them just don't. Even well-meaning people. And so Mike Winger tends to be somebody who's not dogmatic. He looks at objections honestly, And I find no hidden agenda in his presentations, which is why he's kind of my go-to guy when I'm looking for, somebody to help me understand what the Bible says. Another person like that would be Leighton Flowers. Leighton Flowers is just a recent discovery of mine. And, it was really just that there was a person, a guy named Dr. James White, who hit me on to him. But James White, and maybe we'll be looking at him later on. I don't want to pile on James White. But if you look at the way Dr. Leighton Flowers deals with ideas, argumentation, and the way Dr. James White deals with ideas and argumentation, especially in this specific area of what's called determinism, you could not see two polar opposites of someone who I think in Leighton Flowers, who's just wants to understand it, the truth. And I just get the impression, and I don't know Dr. White, and I don't want to be bagging on him, but it just seems to me when he's talking about this issue of determinism, it just seems like he's just trying to protect a worldview, because he does all of the things that, in my opinion, are characteristic of somebody who doesn't really want to understand the truth. They're just trying to protect their idea. He typically has a hidden agenda. In other words, Dr. White will sometimes say something, but there's a meaning behind it that he won't tell you. Like when he talks about the sovereignty of God. You say sovereignty of God, well, yeah, I go along with that. Well, he has a whole different meaning behind that he rarely will say. That's that hidden agenda thing that, I don't say bothers me, but that's what my ears hear. He's very poor at dealing with objections, very belittling to certain people with whom he disagrees. Does not deal with the argument. He's the king of making straw men out of arguments. And finally, I don't know anybody more dogmatic than Dr. White. And so when you juxtapose Dr. Leighton Flowers with a James White, to me, that's where these three principles come out: the hidden agenda, the dealing with objections, and that being dogmatic. People who are looking for the truth, they don't show those things. Very open and honest. Deal with objections properly, not dogmatic. People who are trying to escape the issues, they got a hidden agenda somewhere. They're telling you stuff, but there's something that you should know that they don't want to tell you, that they don't want you to know. Constantly making straw man, personal attacks, all the ad hominem, all the fallacies, and they're usually very dogmatic. If you don't believe me, you're bad. Or something bad's going to happen, or we're going to punish you, or you're going to get pushed out, those kinds of things. So those are the three differences that I think, and as we continue on in this, hopefully I can highlight some of these things as I'm talking about them. And again, I don't want to bag on, when I'm criticizing somebody, like a Dr. James White, I have the highest regard for what he's done. He's done great things, so I don't want to belittle that. I'm simply talking about ideas and not people when I do these criticisms. And so I want to make that clear. Because, listen, we all screw up, right? And again, who am I? All right, so let's get to Dr. Rasmussen's book. So before I get to the book, let me tell you what the book is about. What Dr. Rasmussen is talking about is the big question in philosophy, which is, why is there something rather than nothing? And when I say that's the big question, that's how I understand it. It might be different. Remember, I'm the least credible person on any of this stuff, so always check with a credible source. I don't want anybody to get the idea that I'm some authority on any of this stuff. Just giving you my impressions. But apparently, if I understand correctly, the big question is why is there the planet, people, things like that, rather than nothing at all? And this is the question that Dr. Rasmussen tries to take a look at in his book, How Reason Can Lead to God. And what he does is he basically just takes basic logic and reason and moves from there to this concept of the reality of God. And I got to tell you, this is just, again, an aside. One of the things that has really, I've never, and I'll be honest, I've never not believed God was real. I was grown, when I grew up, going to church with my parents, which it wasn't necessarily my belief in God, but that was just, your parents live in the South. My mom and dad come from Shreveport, Louisiana. If they're born in the South, oftentimes you're probably going to church. But even when my own, at 18, when I kind of took on my own relationship with God, I never not believed that God was real, although I had many times, decades, in which I was not active. I was, doing my own thing. So as I've come to discover these ideas again, there's nothing more obvious to me, it seems, than the reality of God. Through arguments like these, and the arguments that of people like Dr. Rasmussen, again, Dr. Craig, Eric Hernandez, Tim Stratton, what I like is that they don't rely on previous religious experience to know that these things are true. So if you're somebody who has no religious experience, no religious upbringing, no nothing, these arguments are compelling, at least it seems to me, or at least I haven't heard why they are not. And that's the other part of it is that what makes these things seem so, what makes me believe that in the reality of God, from these arguments, as much as these arguments, well, not probably as much as these arguments, but along with these great arguments from people like Dr. Fazer, Dr. Rasmussen, as we're talking about, is the horrible objections from people who want to challenge the existence of God. It's amazing the weak, just terrible, bad ideas, bad objections to the reality of God from leading atheists. I mean, popular YouTube folks, people in academia, Christopher Hitchens, you name it, Sam Harris. It's embarrassing sometimes, some of the challenges put up to the idea of God. And when I first started, again, when I first got into this, when I first saw that debate with William Lane Craig and Sam Harris, my first introduction to these kinds of arguments, these ideas. And since that time, then this has been 7 years now, all I've been doing is looking at what are the arguments against these ideas. And there just aren't very many good ones. The problem of evil is probably the best thing they've got. Anything other than that is just so weak. So, Dr. Rasmussen uses just logic and reason to build this bridge to God. Right? I know I went on a big rant, and I got to stop. I got to stop talking so damn much, but it's hard for me to stop rambling. So let's get into the book and see what Dr. Rasmussen says. But before we do that, what I want to do is let Dr. Rasmussen himself explain his idea. So let me see if I've done this right. I've been practicing this. This is like my fourth try at it. Hopefully this one will work. All right, let's see what happens.
So I have a little bit of reality here. And this reality, let's say, represents everything put together. So it's going to include particles and people and planets and trees and everything that's ever existed, all space and time. And let's call this bit of reality Bob. Bob is the totality of all things. Now the puzzle arises when asking this question about Bob. Why does Bob exist? Have you ever wondered that? Why is there this totality of reality? Rather than just nothing, or maybe just something else, something different in nature, something maybe we couldn't even imagine. Why does Bob exist? And here's an answer you might think of. Maybe there's some other entity. Maybe it's a god or some transcendent being that thinks to itself, let there be Bob, and Bob appears. The problem with this answer, though, is that it contradicts reason, because we define Bob as the reality which includes all realities. And so therefore, since Bob is all things, anything that's outside of Bob is not real. And so there is no real explanation beyond Bob. But then this is puzzling, because the things that we normally experience in life have an explanation beyond themselves. I mean, think of this jacket, for example. It exists. You can see it. It has an explanation beyond itself. It didn't just snap into existence on its own. It's not like something that doesn't exist can think to itself, I shall exist, and then carry itself into existence somehow. That's absurd. It doesn't make sense.
So there's Dr. Rasmussen explaining his idea. And he begins with, how do you explain everything? And what's interesting about his idea, his approach, which blew me away, was I usually thought of it as you've got God who created everything and then everything else is down here. But the way Joshua Rasmussen puts it is that God is part of ultimate reality. And so it has to be all together. God has to be more of, I think, a foundational thing rather than a top down. It's more of a bottom up kind of a thing, which it's an interesting way to think about it. And boy, when he lays it out in his book, it's really hard to argue against it. Which is another thing that I wanted to point out about Dr. Rasmussen is that his books, listen, he writes at the highest level of philosophy. I mean, concepts and ideas that I probably will never be able to grasp. But at the same time, which is why I appreciate people like Dr. Rasmussen, is that he does write what they call popular level books. Popular level books are books for dummies like me. Even I can grab hold. Sometimes there's pictures and stuff like that we all enjoy and love. But the point is that this book is eminently readable for anybody at any level. If you've never studied anything about philosophy like me, you could pick up this book and you're immediately into it. And as I say, you don't have to have a religious background. You don't have to be into religion, wherever you are. You can pick up this book and get into it and and you can move along with it, which is fantastic. So let's get to the first chapter. Well, it's the second chapter. The second chapter talks about the bridge of reason. And I want to point out and highlight some of the things that we talked about earlier about people who are looking for the truth, because Dr. Rasmussen, in my opinion, is an excellent example of that. So he starts off saying, I will seek to build a bridge of reason that leads step by step to a special treasure. Now, I want to stop there. We're not going to get through a lot of this book because there's some things I just wanted to point out. That's the first part. He's very clear about what he's trying to do. No hidden agenda. He's going to build this bridge, and it's going to lead to a special treasure. Now, the special treasure, spoiler alert, it's God, the reality of God. What there isn't here, and you're not going to find it in this book or anywhere in this book, is the idea that if you believe this, you're going to be a better person. Or if you believe this idea, the world will be a better place. Right? There's no promises attached to this idea, to this book. It's just, I'm going to build this bridge, and it logically leads to the existence of God. And that's what I love about that. There's no hidden agenda here. That's that first principle. And right behind that, he says, my building materials are planks of rational thought. Sorry to get to the text here. I apologize. My building materials are planks of rational thought. So again, that's what he's starting with. It's just going to be logic, just going to be reason, and there's no, you don't have to have some previous biblical religious background. You can be totally never heard of God, don't like God. However you start this book, you can get into. So he goes down in the next paragraph. I do not wish to coerce anyone across my bridge unwillingly. Instead, I build this bridge to create an opportunity for explorers to explore. Again, same point. Nobody's forced to do it. You can do it. You can not do it. It's up to you. Dr. Rasmussen's fantastic with the way he presents his ideas. I invite you then to test each step carefully. Try to find holes in the bridge. Try to break it. Test its strength for yourself. You are the owner of this journey. So yet again, this is just another example that he's not afraid of the challenges. He invites you to challenge his ideas. There's no hidden agenda, just using logic and reason, and he's not trying to put one over on you. He invites any challenge that you've got, because for Joshua Rasmussen, this is for you. It's not for him. And that's what I find fantastic about this. Most people who are like this, in my opinion, I have a lot of respect for, but I can get into what they're saying without worrying about there's something that they're trying to, hitch behind the cart. So he continues on. Let me see. My construction tools are the rules of logic. So the building materials are going to be planks of rational thought, and the construction tools are rules of logic. Again, that's all he's going to be using. For example, I will use the law of non-contradiction. Nothing is both true and not true. The rules of logic constitute the core of reason and underwrite all of mathematics and science. I will use logic then to underwrite the basic structure of my bridge. With the rules of logic in hand, I will first hammer down steps that provide the floor of the bridge. So, one of the things I wanted to point out here is that I've noticed in some of the people that I listen to and some of the lectures and folks that I've listened to on different topics, there's this weird thing that I see from a lot of theologians, I think is the word. Pastors, preachers, those kind of people. There seems to be a bit of either a misunderstanding or antipathy towards philosophy. And you'll often hear a pastor or preacher say that, hey, that's just philosophy. We're talking theology, as if the two can be separated. And I don't think they can. As I've said before, I think philosophy and theology is like math and doing your taxes. You have to do those things together. You can't just go, well, I'm going to leave the math out and I just want to do my taxes. And in the same way, you cannot do theology without philosophy. Anytime you're doing theology, really, I think if you're doing almost anything, there's philosophy behind it. And when I say philosophy, I'm not talking about necessarily the metaphysical world. I'm just talking about basic logic and reason. Things that if something's true, then it can't be not true, right? That's that law of non-contradiction. And we all use philosophy every day in every aspect of our life. I just think that we don't really think of it as philosophy because, it's sort of a subconscious thing that we do. But the reason I wanted to point that out is that it's something that I want to explore further, is this idea that there's a lot of people, and it's not just theologians, there's a lot of people in science. E.O. Williams, who was a great scientist, everybody says. He had a little rant in an interview against philosophers. There's a lot of folks out there that don't like philosophers, and here's what I think it is. I think that a lot of people come up with great ideas, or at least seem like great ideas to them. And then, when they're subject to logic and reason, those ideas don't look so great. And rather than backing off the idea, they get mad at philosophers for going, that idea doesn't work very well. If you just think about it logically. That's what I think people don't, they go, that's just philosophy, right? It reminds me of if somebody was doing their tax return, they go, oh man, I got a great tax return. I'm gonna get a ton of money. And you go, well, actually, those numbers don't add up. And they're like, that's just math. Get that out of here, right? It's the same idea, I think. I think people who go up against philosophy are people who don't like their ideas scrutinized by logic and reason, or are afraid to have their ideas scrutinized by logic and reason. That's what I think that antipathy comes through. But what I love about Joshua Rasmussen, or Dr. Rasmussen, is that those are his main tools, logic and reason. And for me, if it's not logical, it's not biblical. It's not reasonable. If it doesn't make sense, you should just stay away from it. That's how it seems to me. All right, where was I? I got lost again. I started rambling on so much. Okay, I will show that nothing serves as an outside cause or outside explanation of reality as a whole. In this sense, reality taken as a whole is self-sufficient. I will then systematically draw out the implications of self-sufficiency. So again, he goes back to his argument that you heard on the video, where all of reality is this one entity, and there's not something outside of it that's causing it. So it's self-sufficient, which is, again, I'd never heard of it that way. But here's the other thing that I wanted to point out. The point where he says, I will systematically draw out the implications of self-sufficiency. Sufficiently. When he says draw out the implications, I think this is important because it seems to me that many times we'll have ideas or thoughts or think something about something, but we don't think about the implications of what we're saying or what we are thinking or believing or asserting as true. And oftentimes we may like the idea so much that we don't think about, well, if this is true, then that must also be true too. And if that's true, then these things are also true. And oftentimes that's where the problems will start to pop up. And again, I hate to bring up Calvinism again, because I don't want to be banging on people, because there's a lot of wonderful people who believe it's true. I just think it's nonsense. And I think the more you get into it, the more idiotic it seems, because the implications are so devastating, terrible for anybody who believes God is the God of the Bible. It's difficult for me to, that's too much. It seems oftentimes that people who assert Calvinism, this is basically determinism for theologians as opposed to materialism, which is determinism for atheists. The determinism for people who believe God is real is just as bad as determinism for naturalists. All the same horrible implications come up. And I'm of the opinion, I don't think anybody really believes in determinism, because nobody acts like it. Everybody acts like we make our own free decisions. I think that determinism can only come up when you're trying to support an ideology that tries to make sense of everything, and it just never works out. But it's specifically because I think of this reason, is that the implications of determinism, the implications of determinism don't match reality. That's why. And so I think that when people come up with these ideas, whether it's materialism, the materialistic determinism, or theistic determinism, I think that's what they call it, I think they just don't think about the implications. And when those implications are brought to them, I think they ignore them. And I think they both have the same answers, whether they're a theist or not, or an atheist. It's a mystery. And I'll tell you, when I hear that from somebody, I don't think it's a mystery. Mysteries would be something that's sort of beyond our knowledge horizon, it seems to me. But they're in fact true. For example, how many planets are in the universe? I just think that's beyond our knowledge horizon. But there is a correct answer, right? It's a mystery as to whether, this is one I heard, which I thought was fabulous. The number of ducks alive today, whether that's an odd or even number. That's a mystery. No way to know that. But there is a correct answer. And that answer is logical and not contradictory. Okay. But when you have ideas that are logically contradictory, like determinism, whether it's theistic or atheistic determinism, those ideas are contradictory. They're not mysteries. Right? You can't claim mystery when something clearly is contradictory. Right? If I could have done that, I could have got through my whole geometry, class in high school and got an A. I could have been valedictorian in math and sciences if every time I had a bad answer and Mr. Boone goes, that's the wrong answer, I go, oh, it's a mystery. Really? You can't do that. It doesn't work like that. So when I hear people talking about ideas and I see that they're clearly contradictory and their answer is it's a mystery, then I know it's a bad idea. At least that's how I see it. So I'm going to stop there. That's just the beginning of the book of how reason can lead to God. Let me give you a picture of that book again. How Reason Can Lead to Good by Dr. Joshua Rasmussen. I cannot recommend you pick up this book again. Let's get another look at Dr. Rasmussen. Look at that handsome man checking out the world, looking at metaphysics all by himself out there. Deep thoughts. That's what every philosopher looks like. I'll badger. Just looking off into the distance like that. Get his book. He also has a website called Worldview Design. Fantastic. It's not a website. His website is joshualrasmussen.com, which is also fabulous. But I was speaking specifically about his YouTube channel called Worldview Design. Fantastic channel. A lot of great stuff. He had started a few years ago and then wasn't active on it for a while, but now he's come back with a new vigor, fantastic production value, great content on there. And and I'll put a link to it so you can kind of follow along, or if you want to look ahead, where he talks about how reason leads to God. He talks about this whole that first video. There's a whole series of them. I think there's like 10 of them. It's stunning. And every time they're very short videos and very simple. I've watched these several times because it's I don't want to say it's hard to get into my head, which, a lot of things. Because it's so simple, but it's so big. And so it's a weird feeling. So watch the videos. Fantastic stuff. And again, I'd love to hear what the objections are, and we'll go through some of them in the book. But Worldview Design is his YouTube channel. JoshuaLRasmussen.com is the website, and the book, How Reason Can Lead to God, is a fantastic book. You should get these books if you're wanting to start understanding these ideas. And it's my opinion, anybody who believes that God is real should read this book. I don't want to say that because everybody says that about a particular book. So let me back off that real quick. This, for me, was a fantastic book to begin to understand why God is real. Apart from just, the Bible tells you so, which is great. Don't want to bag on that. The Bible does tell you so, and that's fine. But there's a lot of people who don't accept the Bible as a source of truth. And so for people like that, I think they find these things appealing. And I believe the Bible is the source of truth. But I'll tell you, when I started looking at these arguments, Dr. Edward Fazer writes a book, The Five Proofs for the Existence of God. Fantabulous book. And once I started reading those books, Dr. William Lane Craig's website, Reasonable, I'm consumed by these things. I'm all the time looking at stuff because it was amazing to me that you could engage God with your intellect and not just emotion. That the whole being can engage with the creator of the universe. That's stunning to me. And so listen, I can't get enough of this. And I'll start talking forever. So I'm going to end it right there. Again, I'm Kevin Metcalf. Thanks for tuning in to Uncolored. We'll go into more of the book next time. And I'll have up on the channel an Uncolored Sports thing. I'm going to try and disconnect it from this because it goes on too long if I do this and then I do the Uncolored Sports thing. So I'm going to try and disconnect the two. But there is one that I wanted to bring up that I think is important and cool. So again, Kevin Metcalf, Uncolored. Leave your comments, subscribe, like. It helps the channel. It does. And thank you very much for tuning in. All right, that's it. I'm out of here.